Coherently, and by leave of the House, I'd ask to share time with my colleague, Senator Walsh.
5 and 5.
5 and 5. Thank
Is that
you very
agreed?
much.
Agreed.
Under Bunrock Nahéireann, Article 2 says it's the entitlement and birthright of every person born on the island of Ireland, which includes its islands and seas, to be part of the Irish nation. This is also the entitlement of all persons otherwise qualified in accordance with the law to be citizens of Ireland. Furthermore, the Irish nation cherishes its special affinity with its people of Irish ancestry living abroad, who share its cultural identity and heritage. Article 2. The most fundamental right of any citizen is the entitlement to vote. And yet Ireland didn't allow Mary McAleese to vote for herself in her own election as president. We exclude as a nation those living in the north and those overseas, referred to in Article 2 of our Constitution. We refuse them the right to vote. The very entitlement of any citizen of any nation. 1.8 million people in the north are entitled to be Irish citizens, yet they're not entitled to vote. 800,000 Irish passport holders living overseas are entitled to be Irish citizens, but they're not entitled to vote. We have 70 million in our diaspora, and they're not given a say either. We give them Article 2 of the Constitution, but we don't give them a vote. We deny 800,000 Irish passport holders living overseas the right to vote because the Dáil is not the place that the establishment would allow such a huge amount of people the balance of power, deciding who would be in government. We won't give anybody in the north a vote in the Dáil. So where do you give them the vote? 800,000 people, those Irish passport holders living outside of the state, is the equivalent of the cities of Dublin, Cork, Galway, Limerick, Waterford combined. Can you imagine excluding those citizens the right to vote in the Irish state? And yet we do it. 33 countries in the Council of Europe, of those, only 4 are like Ireland, where they don't give citizens overseas the vote. In this chamber, this is the place that those people could be given a say, where the political establishment might allow them have a voice within the system of government. And yet, the government are saying, no, we have a better solution. In fact, they have no solution. We will continue to deny Irish citizens the right to have a say. We have appointed great people to the Senate who have come from the north, and their names have been mentioned already. Seamus Mallon, Gordon Wilson, and others from both traditions. Is this not the place that those people will have a say? I believe this is the correct house for them to have a say. But that is a huge democratic deficit, national democratic deficit, a disgrace. But other colleagues have pointed out an even greater and equally worrying democratic deficit when you consider our treatment of EU legislation. Nothing short of scandalous. A deficit unparalleled. Let's just imagine that the first piece of organ transplantation legislation in the history of this state was signed by a minister last August, on the 28th of August last year, without reference to the Dáil, the Senate, or the Health Committee, despite being asked to do so. If you ask Mark Murphy of the Irish Kidney Association, he said, if that legislation had been done better, lives would have been saved. That's how important scrutiny of legislation is. That's how important EU directives are. Let's consider how badly we do legislation in this country. In 1 year, there was 1,291 EU regulations brought into Ireland, 594 statutory instruments without any scrutiny by any legislator, and 164 EU directives brought in a similar manner as the organ transplantation legislation was brought into this country. That's 2,049 laws, regulations, directives. What was the Oireachtas in charge of? What were we responsible for? The Dáil and the Senate and the committees? 47 acts of the Oireachtas, 2%. Were we allowed to scrutinise the EU directives? We were not. The ministers did that themselves, without scrutiny by anybody. And if you were to read, and this is a quote from a former Taoiseach, maybe the government departments are doing better. The number of officials in government departments who look at EU regulations is very small. So who are looking at that 164 EU directives? They're simply being plucked and transposed straight into Irish law without anyone really looking at them. And you know, when you consider that the government know this is a problem, let's think about what Paul Keogh, the government chief whip, said when he was in opposition. Even in respect of those statutory instruments which are laid before the House, I believe that members don't even read them. How many statutory instruments were there? 594. Have we got a national democratic deficit? Is the way we do legislation in this country broken? In the same way as our economy is broken, our banks are broken? It is. And are we fixing it? We most certainly are not. We're making a bad situation worse. And we have no proposal in order to fix our national democratic deficit. We have no proposal to give citizens in the north or those overseas a vote inside in a parliament. When you consider that Daniel O'Connell struggled so hard to give Catholics the vote, that women struggled so hard to get the vote, that those in the north struggled so hard to get the vote, and they achieved that over time. And yet, as a nation, we deny votes to 1.8 million people in the north, 800,000 Irish passport holders overseas. 1 in every 3 person entitled to be an Irish citizen is denied a vote. And the government, their solution to the problem is to make the problem worse. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.